Welcome to We Are Not Alone, where local investigators, as well as world-renowned scientists and ufologists, share their latest evidence in support of the UAP reality. Hi, I'm David Twichell, and for the next hour, we'll be exploring the mysteries of the UFO, UAP, and abduction phenomena. For over 35 years, Chuck Zukowski has been researching the UFO paranormal phenomenon. As a field investigator, he's appeared on numerous radio and television shows discussing his investigations. Chuck approaches every investigation as a skeptic looking for any known possibility before claiming otherwise. He also implements new and innovative field experiments from time to time to enhance his investigations looking for new evidence. He has over 30 years of graphic mixed signal IC microchip design and is a former reserve deputy sheriff with El Paso County Sheriff's Department, Colorado from 2002 to 2011. His education includes an associate's degree, a bachelor's degree, and a certification in electronic engineering. Chuck was the lead investigator along with Heather Taddy and son Daniel Zukowski on the TV show Alien Highway. Chuck was a guest on We Are Not Alone back in June of 2022, and we're happy to have him back on the show with us today. Hello, Chuck.
Hi, how are you doing? I didn't realize it was that long ago.
It was. Wow,
it's crazy. You know, there's a lot been going on since 2022, especially in the field of ufology, huh?
I was just about to say, I'll bet you've had a couple more experiences since then, huh?
That and it's just kind of cool to see, Congress now involved in looking, well, actually, being involved in our line of work. And, then recently we had Barack Obama come out saying that, he believes in extraterrestrials, although you got to read the whole article, if what he said, and he basically said, that, we can't be the only life out here among the jillions of stars and planets out there. But what was funny about that was when he stated that, President Trump's response was, he shouldn't be giving away, classified information. Well, he really wasn't. He was just like everybody else saying, we believe in extraterrestrials. It'd be kind of foolish to think, we're the only life out of all the, billions and billions and billions of stars and galaxies and everything else. But when he said, you shouldn't be giving up classified information, I thought that was,
just confirming it, right?
He was just confirming it, yeah.
What can I say?
It's something that we've already known for years.
Oh, yeah. Tell us something we don't know,
Yeah, exactly. Tell us something we don't know. Although, it seems every now and then you get a wrench thrown, in the system where you come across something, different or new, and it's kind of fun. Yeah, ufology. I was talking to somebody else about this a while ago. Ufology is really, besides being a very exciting hobby to have, it's fun. It can be dangerous. It can be very dangerous depending on what you do and how you apply yourself to what you're doing. God, there's always stuff going on, and if you want an exciting hobby, that's the way to go. Although, you might be spending a lot of time outside at night by yourself.
Well, give me an example of what you mean by could be dangerous.
Oh, there's numerous times where I've been out by myself. Earlier on, actually, even still today, if I go out at night to go investigate an investigation or go somewhere else, I always tell my wife, if you don't hear from me, at least by 4 a.m. or something, there's a problem. And, I always tell my wife basically the area I'm going to be in. And if for some reason, now that we have cell phones and 5G, and it's a little bit easier to get a hold of, your family members, it makes it a little bit easier. But back in the day when I first started doing this, we didn't have cell phones. So basically it was just, if I'm not back, this is the general area I'm going to be in. Now, as for being dangerous, there's a lot of things out there that I've seen in my 35 years of doing this that would probably terrify the average person. And I'm not boasting or anything, but, it's like any other job. You have to work up to this if you're doing it. And then, as you work up over the years, certain things don't bug you as much as they used to. So, it's sort of like a surgeon, it's no big deal after a while to cut someone open and remove organs or do whatever, they become acclimated to it. So, the first few years it was a little tough. And then, now, as you get older, you get wiser, you learn. And, I never go out on an investigation unarmed. Never. I always have a gun with me. Because you never know. Not so much aliens and the unknown, although it's there, but we have to deal with goofy humans too, and then animals. I was alone in, I think it was called Anza area in California, doing some investigation in UFO sightings or lights I'd seen in the area, and it was way late. It must have been 1:30 in the morning. And I'm just standing away from my vehicle a good 100 yards or so. And everything was dark. I'm just kind of watching the night skies, and I got my cameras there, and I hear a noise. I turn on my flashlight, and a pack of coyotes had surrounded me, and I'm by myself, and I'm looking at the pack of coyotes. I mean, they just surrounded me, and I'm looking at them with my flashlight. I saw where my vehicle was, and I said, okay. I got one chance. Now, this was California, so I wasn't really carrying a gun out there. And so I saw my vehicle off at a distance, and I said, here we go. And I just screamed at the top of my lungs and just charged, the coyotes, and they kind of scattered. It kind of opened the door for me to go. And I didn't stop until I got to my door, the vehicle door. But there's been cases like that where animals will come up on you.
Yeah.
And
but they were more afraid of you than you were of them, eh?
Well, at that one point, but they knew I was there. They, because they have excellent eyesight at night, and they purposely surrounded me, a human, so they knew what they were going to do. Who knows what they were going to do? But if they because I've had coyotes come up on me before, but generally not ever surround me. They usually come up and they'll be off at a distance, just kind of watching me. I had a mountain lion one other time do that also. So, it can get kind of dangerous out there. The mountain lion was in Colorado when I was doing an investigation in Bigfoot. So I was up about 10,000 feet elevation. So that's where the mountain lion came in. But most of the time it's cows, because I'll be in an area where it'll be an open range and the cow will walk up on you. It scared the heck out of me. Over and over again. Those guys, as big as they are, over 1,000 pounds, they don't make a lot of noise when they walk.
Yeah.
That's fun. It's fun stuff.
I don't remember it, but I'm told that when I was just a little tyke, just a toddler, I was up at a farm, my cousin's farm, and I wandered out into the pasture where there are a bunch of cows, and I went and wrapped my arms around this cow's leg and was holding on to it. My dad about panicked, and my grandfather, who was a farmer before, he says, don't do anything. He says, David, come here. Come to Grandpa. So I walked over him, and he told my dad afterwards, he said, those cows wouldn't have hurt him, as long as you don't scare them.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, and it's, I've done so many cattle mutilation investigations that, at first, I was a city boy, right? Originally out of California, and then I go to Colorado, and I'm out there in the middle of, farmers' ranches, and there's fields and, grazing areas. And it took a bit to get comfortable walking through the cows. Now bulls. I have issues with bulls. As long as, the bulls are locked up in the corral. Now, although, my wife and I actually had one charge us a couple of years ago, when I was on on our motorcycle, and and it hit the side of the motorcycle. Yeah, it was crazy.
A bull did?
Yeah, it was really interesting. It's just kind of an interesting story. So, it kind of is kind of paranormal related, because when I was in Colorado, there's a place called Black Forest, which is near Colorado Springs, and I found there was an area there where there was an abandoned missile silo, and not too many people knew where it was, but they've had some sightings and some unusual activity near the missile silo. So I took off on the Harley. Now, I used to ride a two-wheel. I had an Ultra Limited, and when my wife and I were riding together in certain places in Colorado, we wanted to go see like waterfalls or ghost towns or something, and it's really tough on a two-wheeler. So I had traded it in and have a tri-glide. That gives me the opportunity, if I want to go off-roading, I can go off-roading, on a motorcycle and not worry about falling over or anything. And so who knew? Because I always told my wife, said, well, this is a lot heavier now, so I think we can handle a deer if a deer pulls out and, jumps out in front of us when we're up in the mountains or something. So I found the area where the missile site was, and then we started to head back home. And I decided, I told my wife, if we take this county road, we could knock 35 minutes off of our ride to get back home. So we're on a county road. And as we're on this dirt road, single lane dirt road, off to the distance, I see this like a Black Angus young bull. He's got to be like 1,100 pounds. And he's charging us from the field. I'm going, well, there's a fence there, and I speeded it up just a little bit. Well, he hopped the fence and came right at us. And I hit the throttle a little bit. And so when he came in, instead of hitting me like this, he came in and hockey checked me. And when he hockey checked me, the bike's 1,100 pounds. So when he hit my bike, I didn't want to go off the side of the road where a ditch was. So I kind of, hockey checked him back to stay on the road, which scared him. And he took off. So, as it turns out, we don't have to worry about deer as much now. If we can handle a bull with the Harley Tri-Glide, we can handle some deer. So I'm not too concerned now.
Well, that's a good segue into speaking of cattle. According to the website, UFOnut.com, you're currently working on 2 cases gathering information about possible cattle mutilations that occurred toward the end of 2025. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I sure can. And unfortunately, God, I was just on the phone. I was on the phone with the deputy last week, and I was on with the phone today. I wasn't going to talk about it too much from the website, but now, I'm just going to go ahead because it's taking them a while to close the case, which is kind of interesting. So basically, it happened towards the end of December in Kansas, in Pottawatomie County, Kansas. Let's see, that's over by Wheaton. And it made the local news. And, because what I do is, I have Google alerts on different things, and that's how I was able to catch it. And every now and then I'll just search. There's different things that I'm looking for to see if anything happened. So I contacted the sheriff's department that's running the investigation on it a while ago, beginning of this year. And I was talking to Sergeant Scott, and I was saying, I told him I was a former deputy, but I do all this stuff now. And he didn't know how quite to take that. But I told him, I said, look, you've had one mutilation already, and if this is truly a mutilation that falls into the cattle mutilation and just not an animal death, but a strange animal death, most likely you're going to have another one. It may not be the same rancher, but it might be someone, or some rancher nearby. And then he paused and he said, we had a second one. I said, So obviously I know what I'm talking about, huh? It really, really intrigued him. And I talked a little bit about, mutilations and what to expect. And he says, well, unfortunately right now our case is still open and I can't talk too much about it till the case is closed. Now that's true. I was a deputy for a few years and you really can't talk about or a sheriff's department can't talk about a case if it's not closed.
Mm-hmm.
It's a liability issue. So he says, well, contact me towards maybe the first, second week of February. And, hopefully the case will be closed by then. So I talked to him last week and I talked to him this week and, the case is still open. So, so I contacted, I think his name is Don. He was the reporter that originally ran on this story. I talked with him and I asked him if there was any other information, new information that he's heard on this. He says, no, I haven't heard anything, so far. So at this point we have two animals and basically it was, I think I have it right here where they said, there was just strange cuts and unusual cuts. And I mean, that was what the article was saying, and then also what was on the sheriff's Facebook page. So we had one animal that was definitely that they saw, and then I found out that there was a second animal that had similar cuts. Now, what intrigues me is the fact that it's been a little bit, and I generally know how long it takes to close a case, to do an investigation. Now, originally, when I talked to him, he said the case is open because we're awaiting, the veterinary results, toxicity or, toxic to see whether or not, it was poisoned. And of course, that doesn't explain the cuts.
No, I was going to say.
But, so
when you say, I'm sorry to interrupt, but when you say, are you saying excisions?
Yeah. Well, he didn't say that. I said I was the one who told him that the cuts will look like they're surgically done, and he didn't say, "Oh, no, they're not." Because I've talked to deputies before on other cases, and they were able to recognize that that the animal was killed, by a predator type of thing, and there was rip marks. So when I said, well, the cuts are going to look like a surgeon did it with a scalpel. That's what you're not going to see any blood, and you're not going to see any movement from the cow, from legs of the cow, in the dirt. It's as if the animal was, just lay there. And I said on top of that, if you're looking, find out from the vet to see whether any internal organs were missing. Find out if the heart was collapsed, meaning it was drained of blood. And I gave him a couple things to think about, but it was interesting because he didn't come back and say, "Oh no, you could definitely tell there was blood everywhere." He didn't say any of that. He just stayed quiet, which leads me to believe that now this has happened a lot with me with other sheriff's departments because they really don't understand what's going on. They're afraid to go public too much with it because of the giggle factor But the giggle factor isn't as bad as it used to be now, especially when you have or former President Barack Obama and Trump coming, starting the whole disclosure program, on his first term, and congressional hearings now. So it should be a little more relaxing for the sheriff's departments to be able to talk about it. But, they're a small department and, I would think that maybe they might be afraid of, of people coming in and causing issues and trying to harass the rancher and da-da-da-da. But it was interesting. Yeah. So it was interesting I've done enough of them that I could read what was going on in his voice and his pauses and the fact that there's certain questions that he just didn't, answer right out. So when I talked to him today and I that was one of the main reasons I wanted to get an update for this podcast, and they said, well, no, the case is still open. Now, this is an issue now. Okay, so if the case is still open, now they've had more than enough time to get any type of toxic reports back. They've had plenty of time to get the veterinary reports back. Something else is going on there that leaves that case open. I almost want to drive to Kansas and see it for myself, go what's going on. But
they're still
I promise I wouldn't.
They're still looking for the perp.
Yeah.
I'm going to find him.
I think, because originally I had them, I told me my website, and if you go to my website, at the very top, you'll see the menu, and one of the menu buttons is animal mutilations. And I've got 55 or so blogs just on animal mutilations. I said, there's so much information in there that, look through it, see what you think, da, 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 da. And I told someone else, another deputy today, the same thing, another deputy I hadn't talked to. And I always say the same thing. I say, if you have any questions, give me a call. I'd be more than happy to work with you, to let you know what's going on, that, everything. So, we'll see what's going to happen now. But for whatever reason, they're staying quiet. Yeah. And that's an issue. Now, generally, when you work for the public, anybody in the U.S. can get a copy of a case report from any law enforcement agency because taxes pay for that, right? Taxes pay their salaries. So, or budgets through taxes or through the state. So, they really can't deny, but they can deny getting you the case report by telling you it's still open. Now, is it closed?
We can't confirm nor deny.
I can't confirm or deny. Now, if I still lived in Colorado, I would have been close enough. It would have been a few hours to get to this area. Mm-hmm. But now I'm in Texas, so it's a little bit further. Matter of fact, when I was in Colorado, there were 5 mutilations that occurred out here in Texas. And I had talked to the actual deputy that ran the investigation, a female deputy, and we had two or three very long conversations, and she was really interested of what I knew, and I had sent her numerous photographs and information to what to look for, because there are like I said, 5 or 6 cases. I think they said the 6th case was an issue, but definitely 5, a couple of different ranches, and the part that really got her, well, actually just got her intrigued, I should say. When I told them that all the cows would be lying on the same side or facing the same direction, especially because they happen so closely together, she didn't say anything. I think at first she thought this is kind of normal. But when I got in, I said, are they all lying on the same side? Are they all facing east to west? They all have similar cuts, and that's when I got her. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, we were working back and forth, and then the sheriff's department, the sheriff stepped in and stopped all communication ordered all the deputies not to communicate with anybody outside the department anymore. Mm. So,
getting too close, is that it?
That cutting it too close. Now, here's pretty cool information on that is, I was also in communication with a fellow investigator out in Texas, and they did some research and found out that there was a military aircraft in the area after the fact.
Okay.
And they had proof. Actually, it was really interesting. It's kind of cool. So the military will use trainers to investigate. This is what I found out a few times. So it'll be like if they're in the area, it's because they're training, and it's a training aircraft. It's designated as a trainer aircraft. So if you have flight radar, which we can all have, and I have it on my iPhone, you can track airplanes in certain areas, and depending if you pay, for the whole app, you can find out where they came from, and you backtrack and save all that information. So it turned out to be I think it was 2 trainers that were out there flying over the area, and but the app says, well, no, they're military training, planes. So obviously, they're training. That's the impression you want to get.
Right.
But or they're set up with equipment, cameras, night vision, and so they use the trainers just to suppress, or not to suppress, but to hide. Now, obviously, if they flew a Black Hawk helicopter out there, it'd be noticed really quick.
I would think.
So you gotta disguise them. I mean, I'm sure a lot of cases they've used commercial aircraft, small, single engine Pipers or something, too.
I need to take just a moment to remind our listeners that you're listening to WHFR.FM, Making Waves. You're listening to We Are Not Alone. I'm David Twichell, and we're speaking with investigator Mr. Chuck Zukowski. And we're talking about cattle mutilations and what about human abductions? Have there been any recent credible human abduction cases in Texas?
No, not really. No. And it's interesting because I had a conversation with another podcaster a week or so ago. He was talking about wanting to be on his show, and we just talked for a bit, and that kind of popped up. The thing is there's been a couple of cases, but it's years and years and years ago. I think it was one in Tennessee and one in Canada. Besides, I think there was one in, I don't know if it was Brazil or wherever it was, back down there, the one that made the news. But generally, no, not really. And for your the people who watch this show, I wouldn't be too concerned about aliens killing us. There hasn't been. I mean, the problems that we've had in the past with a lot of negativity with extraterrestrials are the people who've been abducted. Now, if this is interesting, you have to understand that the people who've been abducted, if they have a pleasant experience through the abduction, they become an experiencer, right? If they have a negative, then they become an abductee. And it all depends on your mental capability of handling what just happened, your personality, your background, how open you are to this stuff. If you're not completely open to ufology and something happens, people are going to flip out. Malpractice kills. I swear, malpractice kills over 300,000 people a year. Medical malpractice. So don't even be concerned. I'd be more worried about the doctors and the places that you're going to than I'd be worried about invasion. That's all movie stuff. I've been doing this for so long. Yeah. I've communicated with the UFO in 2016, July 3rd, communicated via lights back and forth. I've had the responses to some of my experiments, my binary light experiments, where lights will pop up when I'm running the experiment. The only time that I felt threatened was on that July 3rd one, 2016, because after there was some communication with something up in the sky, and this is a totally just a new moon night, completely dark. You could see all the stars, but yet I couldn't see what was flashing back at me through my night vision. I couldn't see it. I could see stars, but yet there was a light that was flashing back. I'd flashed two times with my truck lights. They would flash two lights back, so we were going back and forth. I even delayed a set of flashes like a couple minutes to make sure it wasn't a strobe. So so I knew that we were in communication. But after it stopped, everything got completely silent, and my truck was probably 20 feet away. My first Ram truck, if you touch the handle, the capacitance in your hand will turn on the lights on the inside. So after everything went dead silent, I mean nothing. And I mean we're out in the middle of nowhere outside of Roswell, 60 miles, and you couldn't hear cows, you couldn't hear everything. It just became just dead silence. And then the lights inside my truck came on, which means that there was some type of electromagnetic field in the area. And then as soon as my lights came on inside my truck, cows started mooing everywhere, just all around. And coyotes were just going crazy, just all of a sudden. And then right after that, a vehicle, I was with my sister at the time, and we were just on a ranch road just off of the main two-lane highway on a ranch road. And off a distance, you could see a car go by, and it went down about an eighth of a mile and pulled off and pulled into the dirt a bit. And I put my night vision goggles or binoculars towards it, and it looked like a male figure got out and just stood by the car staring at me and at us, basically. It didn't say, it was like a sedan, and it was just kind of staring at us. And that's why I go, okay, time to go. So
staring at you? He was staring at you?
Yeah, they were watching us. Yeah, so whatever was going on there, and it could have been a hot spot because that was the same area where I investigated the Roswell rock. And that goes back years ago, too. It was found it was a really interesting rock that had a three-dimensional engraving that came out of the rock of the Littleton crop circle in England. And both sides of the crop circle were polarized, one positive, one negative. So if you put a magnet in the middle of the rock, it would spin the rock. So it was really interesting. And yeah, we thought maybe it might have been a lodestone, but if it was a lodestone, it was a lodestone that had a three-dimensional image coming out of it that was polarized. And generally, lodestones aren't polarized. The whole stone, is more positive or more negative. I think it's more positive. So that was kind of interesting, but that's not the first time. There's been cases where, people just pop up out of nowhere, kind of watching you. Now, obviously some of them would be residents, but generally the residents are, you can tell, because they want to be seen. It's the ones that are, way off a distance that are watching you that don't want you to ID them. And really nobody knew we were going to be out there. So whatever happened in that area, somebody probably within the government was monitoring what was going on out there before we showed up.
It seems like somebody, whether it was residents or military or whatever, they knew that was a hot spot, and they were keeping a close eye on it, keeping their cards close to the vest. Huh?
Yeah, exactly. And it's okay. I've talked to some amateur investigators and I would have stayed there. I would have gone over and confronted them. I would have done it. And that's why you're an amateur. Because us experienced investigators don't do that. Because we've learned over the years, walk away today, right, investigate tomorrow. Right. There were a few cases back about 20 years ago where it seemed like all within about a month or so, we lost a couple of investigators. It's kind of like died of auto accidents or heart attacks or something. It was in the news, well, at least in the paranormal type news, where I think it was at least 3. Now, obviously it could just be coincidence, but you don't ever want to cross that proverbial line. And there's a proverbial line of you don't want to cross, because I know for a fact that, and I knew before Bigelow came out, and back in 2017 when they said, Robert Bigelow was working with the Pentagon, and what did they give him, like 11 million or 22 million budget or whatever? Because I had worked with Bigelow before that, and when I was on the STAR team with MUFON out of Colorado, I found out some information that Bigelow was funding the STAR team, and I had the very first STAR case. And it was a cattle mutilation over in Weston, Colorado. But as I was researching that, I was researching Bigelow's involvement in MUFON because I don't know, some of us can just feel red flags, You just feel that something's not right. And I found out, and was confirmed later through someone in MUFON, that the money that he was giving MUFON, he was getting from somewhere else. So someone was funding him, and he in turn was funding MUFON. And what happened was why he kind of backed out of that, because we caught him I was assistant state director at the time, but I was in communication with state directors all over the U.S. and because we're trying to run the STAR program. And a STAR program is basically one of those investigations that you would really need a very experienced investigator, to work with, and one that's got the materials, the experience, and everything they need, and they know how to do it and go quickly and get involved in it. So those investigations that we thought were STAR programs, we would have to, I'd say we, but MUFON would have to send it to Bigelow first, and Bigelow would have to approve it as a STAR investigation so he could fund it. Mm-hmm. Right. And that's what he did with my investigation. Well, it turns out after that he was taking a couple of days before he was getting back to MUFON saying, yeah, this is a STAR investigation, this isn't. And a couple of state directors ran on investigations after it was approved and found out from the eyewitnesses. They said, oh, you were here yesterday. No, we weren't. Well, no, the team was here yesterday, and we already talked to him. So he was jumping MUFON investigators by at least a day, and we caught him. And of course, I'm not going to confront a billionaire because I'm a hundredaire, right? I have $100 here and $100 there, but I'm not going to. There's no way I can confront it. But I would just basically talk all about it, to internals at MUFON and say, hey, watch this guy. Now, later on, I ended up working with him on a piece of Roswell debris that was found back in 2000, and he sat on that for over a year, and finally came back and said it was nothing, but we knew it wasn't anything. But I knew all that before 2017, when we found out that he was getting money from the Pentagon to run investigations. So basically, in my opinion, the STAR program, when Bigelow was running it, was being funded by the Pentagon.
By the Pentagon, yeah.
By the Pentagon. Now, MUFON has always, there's so many people involved in MUFON over the years that have been working with the government, feeding information back and forth. And it kind of makes sense. Because when did Project Blue Book end? Was it 68? I think
66.
66. Well, a year later is when MUFON started.
No, I'm sorry. You're right. 68.
68. So a year later, I think it was 69 that MUFON started. And when MUFON started, it was started by individuals that were former military and former intelligence. And at the time, they were called the Avery Group. And they all had call signs that were birds. But I mean, this was the late 60s. So, so my opinion, Project Blue Book never ended.
Right.
Project Blue Book kept going on because someone in the government said, hey, guess what? Instead of J. Allen Hynek running around to death, running all over the place, hey, let's get an organization that can bring in volunteers from all over the United States and run investigations for us for free. That's my opinion. That's how I saw it when I was assistant state director. I could see that. Now, is that a bad thing? No, not really. Not really. I mean, because we're all in together. The military, in some cases, we don't want to piss off those guys, and that's why I say you don't want to cross that proverbial line. If someone calls you and asks you specific information, tell them it's not worth your life. Just because you have an attitude or you have an ego, it doesn't matter. We're all in this together. We're all trying to get this information and learn. So we all want to succeed. And I think the government jumped us a few times, and they have a lot more information. But
okay. I need to take one more break to remind our listeners that you're listening to WHFR.FM. It's a station making waves. And I'm David Twichell, your host on We Are Not Alone. We're speaking with UFO investigator, Mr. Chuck Zukowski.
Yep.
So, go ahead, Chuck.
Well, I was going to say, twice in my career, I've had someone from the government call me And towards the beginning, when we first had cell phones and the cell phone numbers weren't readily available, I had someone call me and ask me specific questions about Roswell, because I did a press release on what we found at Roswell. And then years later, after multiple animal mutilation investigations I've done, I had someone call me and ask me specific questions about cattle mutilations and what I found and what my theories were. And both times they were probably around 8:30 at night when I was called. And both times I said, if you have any other questions, be free to call me. I'm not hiding anything from you. I don't want to be that person that disappears.
Yeah, really.
I'll give them whatever you want. Like I said, you can walk away from an investigation today, but start another one tomorrow. So, I mean, there's so many out there. You don't have to be, just so focused on one thing that you have to get done. You don't need to do the, that type of investigation because there's so much stuff. That's why I've done so many different types of investigations, from mutilations to ghost investigations to Bigfoot to, Roswell, because there's so much. It's fun.
Yeah, you're in Texas now. You were in Colorado. In Texas, the FAA just recently shut down El Paso International Airport. Yeah, you knew I was coming up with that.
Yeah.
So, they shut it down on February the 10th for 10 days, except it reopened just a few hours later. And the Army field lasers against Mexican cartel drones that weren't even there. They said they claimed they fired them, and they weren't even there. Well, what's your take on this incident?
Well, I do know. Okay, well, there's a couple different things, because that whole area over there, there's a lot of UFO activity, has been for a long time. And UFOs love military bases. They love to hang around military bases. So if there was something in the air that couldn't be explained, I mean, was it Mantell, right? Mantell? It chased a UFO, and that flew over a base, right? Actually, Fort Knox, where our base is.
Right.
So it's been going on for years, decades. And so something's in the area, they closed down the airspace because of commercial airspace, and that would make sense because they're trying to figure out what's going on. Now, I can tell you that if it wasn't UFOs, I would lean more towards cartel stuff because of what I learned when I was a deputy from people who were worked in other agencies outside of Colorado, but federal agencies, and what I learned about what cartels were doing and how they were sending drugs over here and to the U.S. and how they were at the time, fighting ICE and doing. I mean, this is basically, it's a mafia is what it is, big time. Mm-hmm. And so I wouldn't put past it.
What's a mafia? The cartels or ICE?
Yeah, well, you hear about that, but I've worked with ICE. I've worked with ICE a couple of times in Colorado, just as if they arrest anybody that's not an illegal immigrant that goes in my car. And I've worked with SWAT a few times too. I wish I could tell you, there's so many horrific stories and incidents that I found out that legal immigrants were doing here. And I'm all for immigration. I am all for it, but you got to do it right, because if you open the borders up, you got these bad people that will take advantage of that and come right in, like the Venezuelans have already done it, and a few others, and they start doing drugs or not doing drugs, but selling drugs and stuff. Right. I was part of one of the largest drug busts that we've had in that El Paso County area. We went in to our briefing. There was like 98 officers at this briefing, and it was in the county. And Fort Carson actually gifted us a helicopter, a military helicopter for surveillance. and it was a large complex, and I can't remember what nationality these illegal immigrants were, but they had 3 or 4 fentanyl labs there. They had shooting houses on the premises, shooting towers to combat. I mean, that's why there were so many of us. And as it turned out, I was in charge of taxing the people out that they arrested that worked in the labs, but not the bad guys. They gave me the lab workers, and that's what I had in my van. And people don't know that. People don't realize, and this was in Colorado, and this has been going on for a few years. What finally happened was there was a company that's very similar to like Tractor Supply we have out here in Texas that sells propane. And they started flagging a bunch of these people over a period of months that were buying more propane that you normally should buy, for what you say you need it for. and that's what the red flag was. But and I've heard other horror stories too. So I'm all for ICE. I know, granted, there's always going to be knuckleheads in ICE. I know that they had, because I needed people so quickly that they kind of skirted some of the training, which they shouldn't have done. But
going back to this FAA shutdown, what was the reason for that?
Well, I've heard both sides. I've heard that there was some type of object in the sky that wasn't a balloon, and it wasn't a drone, and that's what people were, the locals were saying. And then the flip side was that the cartel is testing drone warfare like Ukraine's doing with Russia. And I have a DJI drone, and I could take my DJI drone and I could set it up, with an explosive, by adding, some other, type of technology to it, and then use it. So that was the other thing too. And I'm hoping that's not the case though, because that's scary. That's more scary.
Don't they have technology at airports and military, especially military airports, to shut these drones down if they get in their airspace and they just don't stand a chance?
Generally, yeah, I'm guessing now whether or not Fort Bliss has got that set up, I can't, NORAD, that area, Space Command definitely would, Schriever Air Force Base definitely would. I don't know that much about Fort Bliss if they have it, but yeah, it's a simple technology that, it's just a high energy impulse beam that will just knock the electronics off and they just drop out of the sky.
Right.
Type of thing. But I can't tell you whether or not. My son was at Fort Bliss a while ago, a long time ago. He's Army, and it's more like an infantry type of thing. Mm-hmm. But if they didn't have it, they probably have it now, especially if it was, let's say, cartel related. Now, what's interesting about this? Now, if we would have had this conversation a couple of weeks ago, I might have gone the other way with UFOs. But it seemed like right after that incident happened, Mexico's military went after cartels. And now I don't know if you've been watching the news lately, but you can't, if you go to Cozumel, like today, I think it was, Carnival cruise ship says, yeah, we can go to Cozumel, but all excursions to the main island have been canceled, and Puerto Vallarta, all that, that's going on too. But it seemed like it was just a few days after that incident that the Mexican military went after cartels, and then they got the main guy, and then now there's retribution because of that. Right. Now, I'm not saying it's all tied, but it just seemed like it was kind of a coincidence. So that's why I'm leaning more towards cartels than UFOs, only because of what happened just after that.
All right. Now, when you were on our show last time, we talked at length about Ben Mazarich. I remember.
Ben Mesrick? Yeah.
Is the 37th parallel, and your involvement with that. So what exactly is the 37th parallel? Could you remind our listeners of that?
Well, what happened, it was interesting because I was on a first season of an Unexplained Files season 1, and I was doing a cattle mutilation segment on it.
Mm.
And towards the end of my segment, I started talking about my 37th degree latitude theory. And what I found out was a lot of cattle mutilations that were occurring in Colorado were on the 37th degree latitude. And then I started stretching out across the country and noticed Area 51's on there, and Taos, New Mexico, and Aztec, and and it was going, and all. And then I was looking at other things too, like, Native American holy sites, Native American spiritual sites, I should say,
Mm-hmm.
and other things too, amongst UFO sightings. And then I went a little bit deeper, and it turns out that on the 37th degree latitude across the United States, you could hit every underwater aquifer. So, we have aquifers that go across the U.S. Well, on that latitude, you could hit every one of them. And my original theory was that UFOs use hydrogen. And that would make sense because we are a rich planet of hydrogen, meaning water.
Mm-hmm.
We have more water underground than we have above the ground. That's how much water this planet has. Now, we don't have hydrogen. We have nitrogen and oxygen in our atmosphere, but the hydrogen comes from water. Now, you look at the Skinwalker Ranch. The Skinwalker Ranch is in an area in Utah that it's high in petroleum, and there's water, underground water sources nearby. Now, if you were an extraterrestrial traveling through space, there's an abundance of hydrogen in space. If you used hydrogen for whatever, let's just say, you could actually extract it from the space. Now, when you're on the planet, you can extract it from water, or you can extract it from petroleum products. So, crude oil and natural gas. All you got to, it just takes a little electronic device to convert it to get a hydrogen. So I can tell you that if you want to look for Skinwalker ranches, and there's a lot of them all over the U.S., Skinwalker, it's overrated. The one in Utah is way overrated because of the TV shows.
Right.
There's dozens everywhere that are just as important as that one. But if you're going to look for the possibility of where a UFO base or facility or where they congregate would be, you would look across the U.S. and say, okay, first off, where we see some, where we see the most sightings, is there water there, or is there petroleum products there, underground in that area? And then third, if it's petroleum products, how electromagnetic fields, if you go to the area, are you able to pick up higher electromagnetic fields in the area? Because that would tell you that, there's a processing going on. Mm. And so, like hydrogen, our sun uses fusion to create, infrared A and or ultraviolet A and B, what we get sunburned with. But we can't see that because it's sunlight, right? But the sun uses hydrogen to make that. Well, if our UFOs, like the Tic Tac, the pilot's saying, well, we don't see a propulsion system. Well, let's just say there was a propulsion system, but it's not in our visible light spectrum. It's an infrared, or ultraviolet A or ultraviolet B, because it's sunlight. And that's what our sun is doing. So what a cool way of being able to mask your exhaust, your propulsion, because it's just sunlight.
Right. Yeah. There's been rumors for quite some time now that they were going to make a movie or documentary about the 37th parallel. Can you confirm that? Yes and no.
So what happened was
take a pick.
Yeah. So what happened was, this is before COVID, just when COVID hit. They had hired a writer, a big movie. I can't mention his name, but a movie writer that's written some pretty cool movies. And I met with him, and I took him to places where we had UFO sightings, and I had him talk to cattle ranchers. And so he wrote a script. The script had changed a couple times with New Line Cinema, and they were just going to do some additions on it, and then COVID kind of hit, and everything fell apart after that. And since then, Hollywood's been kind of like in the keister. Hollywood hasn't come back from what happened during COVID, where everybody stayed home. Right. And then everything went streaming. And right now, I'm watching this closely. You got Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers owns, New Line Cinema. I sold my life rights to New Line Cinema Warner Brothers on the 37th parallel for a movie. If Warner Brothers New Line Cinema gets purchased by Netflix, I doubt we'll ever see any major motion pictures coming out. Netflix will just turn it into, streaming movies.
Right.
They may, if anything, they may run it a week, in a movie theater, but that's not what Netflix does. I want to see Paramount buy, Warner Brothers, because Paramount's been around since Bob Hope and Bing Crosby.
Yeah.
So they worked with Paramount back in the days. And so that'll keep the movies going. And I want to see the theaters open back up. I want to see more movies because I enjoy that.
We only have about a minute, but I wanted to ask you, your TV show Alien Highway is still running in syndication. And are there any plans to revive the series?
I've had some people, I've talked to some other producers about revising it. And the problem is we're at a weird time right now, with production companies. There's another strike going on, I guess, within the movie industry. And, so we got to get, once we get back on track again, who knows? But, there's so many people that I knew that were in TV production that lost their jobs too. Now we were slated for a second season, but Scripps came in and purchased, I think it was a Discovery Network or something. And then, like anything else, when a big company comes in and buys out another one or buys into it, whatever projects were on the table get stopped, and our executive producer was let go. And the funding for our show for second season was given to somebody else, the executive producer that came through Scripps. And that's just what happens, So if we wouldn't have had, another company come in and do that, we would have had a second season because our ratings were really good. And we were the most watched show on that particular channel on Wednesday nights, and or that Discovery Network on Wednesday nights, and we did really good. Our ratings were better than some of the other UFO and ghost shows that have been on since then, and it gets me mad because I'm going, our ratings are a lot better than that.
So people can go to UFONut.com to find out more about your work.
Yeah, and how that name came about, real quick, is I had a invitation to see Area 51 from Freedom Ridge years and years and years ago. And I had a guide, and we were going to go to Freedom Ridge so I could take pictures of Area 51. And right before it, I was going to go out there to Rachel, Nevada. Freedom Ridge was taken by Nellis. And so when I went out there, I was like one of the second or third people to cut the trail up Tickaboo Peak. I was within the first four guys that hiked up Tickaboo Peak to take pictures. Now that's where you go now, is Tickaboo Peak. But so when I was there, someone from Nellis shadowed me. Of course, we knew who he was, and another person shadowed me. But after we got back from Tickaboo Peak, I talked to this individual who worked with Nellis, and I said, "So I'm no threat, am I?" He goes, "Nah, you're just some UFO nut." So I took that and I ran with that.
Yeah. Chuck Zukowski, thank you so much for joining us on We Are Not Alone.
Thank you. And we're not alone either. Let me tell you that.
Okay, but thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye now.
And thank you, the loyal listener. Go to WHFR's homepage and scroll down to Talk Shows and click on We Are Not Alone for more of the archive shows. Or visit my website at ufoimplications.com. That's ufoimplications.com for all the archive shows.